Hey Piyush, welcome to day 1000.
Hey Kavan, thank you so much for having me.
It's going to be a very exciting conversation. A lot of CPG founders who are building in this space have very interesting journeys where somebody like you who worked in a large corporation like a P&G for over a decade and led some very interesting product lines, decided to start up. Then I think you also, went in the hair care space before going to the science-backed skincare space now. You've
Right.
raised millions of dollars. You've seen some great growth, and the idea here today is to just unpack how the first 1,000 days of a founder's life look like. I believe you've been building, for well over the first 3 years. You're in your fourth year, and I'm sure, lot of learnings from various people for various CPG founders can be extracted. But before we get into all of this, Piyush, why don't you quickly introduce yourself and your company to us?
Sure, Kavan, thank you for having me here and great to be here again. About me, yes, like you said, I worked with PNG for a decade. In my last assignment, I was sales director for skincare, home care, and personal care categories, handling brands like Olay, Old Spice, and The Pure for India. That time, skincare space seemed really interesting, and we dived right in with my brother-in-law, who's my co-founder, Dr. Prashant Agrawal, bringing in Skin Inspired to India. The mission was always to raise the bar on skincare quality in India. We are a dermat formulated, high efficacy driven skincare, and it's been close to 3+ years of operations now. We operate in various categories like cleansers, face serums, face moisturizers, night cream, sunscreen spray, and all of those. Among these, some of the categories like night cream, we are among the top three in India. On body sunscreen spray, we are already on number one. So, going good so far, and really excited to have this chat with you.
Fantastic. I think getting in even in the top three in such a short period of time is very much commendable. And I'm sure our experience speaks to itself. Take us back to the first 30 days, right, of you running your company. Getting customers is always the biggest question. How did you end up getting your first few customers?
So interestingly, it didn't start as a D2C brand. While the idea was always to have the consumer playbook live, we said that if we are genuinely a dermaceutical brand, then dermatologists should actually prescribe us for our efficacy. And that is how we started by being a pure pharma company where we had medical representatives. And of course, I personally went to hundreds of dermatologists across Mumbai, Delhi, Jaipur, convinced them about our product. And so our first hundred and thousands of customers were actually recruited through prescription of dermatologists. And that is how Skin Inspired's journey began.
Fantastic. Prescription as an acquisition channel is very new. Having, I guess, experts endorse you. But I would say that seems the harder path sometimes for people where they must be thinking, yeah, I am nobody. I'm a fresh company. Why would an expert really trust me? So how did you build trust with these healthcare professionals in the start?
That is precisely the point, right? If I am nobody, the only reason for them to prescribe me is my product superiority. So technically, the product should speak for itself, and that's exactly what we did. We said we are, of course, here to not just say, but prove it. You can take the products, as many samples that you need to really try on your patients and get convinced that you are seeing better results than any clinical grade products that you are currently prescribing. And once that happened over months, then dermatologists start getting convinced that, we genuinely have multifunctional formulations that work effectively as well as are safe for their patients. And that is how they got convinced to actually start prescribing us.
Lovely. I think that's such a great loop because you're also creating evidence along with testimonials and endorsements in this process.
That was precisely the thought.
Fantastic. I think that's a great strategy. Now we spoke about getting customers. I want to jump into the second part, which is spends. Maybe you've received some funding. Maybe you've seen your competitor and realized, we have to grow fast and move fast. We have targets. And in that chase of, fast growth, often you end up making spends you regret. Could you tell me in the first 1,000 days, what are the top spends you regret?
That's a very interesting question. And if I reflect on it, you're right. We've been very lucky to get funded by Unilever Ventures right from first quarter of our launch. And with great expectations, money comes great expectations. So indeed, in the bid to grow faster, there were times when we over relied on an agency's expertise to create demand for us, which is where, you start working with performance marketing agencies, e-commerce agents who obviously have some experience, but honestly, there have been times when I now look back and I realize that it would have been better spent if we were at the center doing those spends ourselves so that the learnings compounded way better than getting somebody else to push growth for you, because technically that would never happen until you understand your consumer, your product market fit better than anybody else. And that is where, with the realization, we also started building a very strong in-house team, and now almost everything happens directly through employees and team members who understand the brand better than most others would.
Very interesting. I think PNG experience probably would conventionally say an agency route is better because generally in-house is slow and perhaps more expensive too if you consider all kinds of costs. But as you said, you probably lose control. So how does one really, scale up, let's say, a marketing or a creative when you'll have to, get on the grind of finding the right creative people, meeting people, ad people, and kind of doing all the headache. It seems so much easy to be like, I'll throw, some money, get an agency who will at least from next week kick off the operations, right? So how do you really deal with that question?
So very fair question, and I think it's a balance that you need to understand what parts of business are you outsourcing, and something like core understanding of consumers, creating creatives basis those insights, or even media planning. What are the kind of cohorts you want to touch? You need to be at the helm of everything like these. Where agencies can really help in, of course, is one, sometimes tasks are too repetitive and operationally they can heavy lift for you until you find the right fit in terms of employees, in terms of scale, where you can actually afford full-time people on board. But that's the fine line, right? You want to outsource those parts of business which are more mechanical and operational in nature, while continuing to work on those areas which directly impact customer acquisition and retention in the long run.
Lovely. I think the nuance there is really focus on understanding what is core and what is chore. I think accordingly you'll be able to kind of understand which areas to outsource or not. I've seen this as a very, very common spends people regret, which is getting the wrong hire, getting the wrong agency, and then not having visibility into what the customers are saying and why things are not working. So I think that's smart. Any other things which come to your mind in terms of spends you regret?
So very early on, because we were funded, we could also have the luxury of putting up very big stalls at dermatology conferences, which in a way is a good way to initiate top of funnel, but you need to be fully prepared in terms of whether you have medical representatives who can then eventually go at the right frequency and touch those leads back. Otherwise, it's a money wasted, right? Is where I think as a founder, you start realizing that you should not bite more than what you can chew. You need to have enough systems, processes that you can operate at the scale at which you are aspiring for.
Got it. Got it. I think this is a good segue for our third question. Now, the third question is about channels of acquisition of customers. As you, I think, we already mentioned a bunch of them. We've spoken about ads. We've spoken about even, I think, events, etc. And everybody's always confused what will work and what will not. Often people recommend throw a wide net, try various things. और फिर देखो आपके लिए क्या चलता है, right? So I wanted to know from your experience in your first 3 years, what had been like underrated channels and what had been overrated channels of customer acquisition?
For customer acquisition, as in demand generation channels, if I talk about, I think one of the most underrated channel is just putting yourself out there and talking about your product, because you at the center of everything builds a lot of trust, and probably you are best placed to talk about your product because you know the product in and out, right? So whether I talk about it on LinkedIn through my post, or whether I put a reel out there, or Dr. Prashant does that for the brand, we have seen immense impact in terms of top of funnel to the conversation that we want to drive about the brand. So it is one of the definitely underrated channel. In terms of overrated channel, I think e-commerce advertising is something that I realized a little late, is quite overrated, and I'll tell you why. It is also one of the channels where you see impact very quick, because you are always targeting a consumer who's at the bottom of the funnel, very warm and really interested. So the minute you start putting yourself out there, in the final leg of consumer journey against a keyword and showing your brand, you tend to get good conversions and you start scaling thinking that this is a good demand generation channel. But what really happens is that it cannot be scaled and the incrementality is poor because you are not technically building brand. You are just competing on certain keywords and putting yourself out there every time a consumer is interested in the subcategory for that keyword. So I think in the long term, if you are not also activating brand building channels, let's say YouTube ads or meta advertising or other facets where top of funnel takes precedence, then it can be really harmful to have over dependence on e-commerce as customer acquisition channel.
The point you mentioned about brand, right, is something I would love to follow up upon, because it's obviously clear that you need to do brand building because your performance marketing will get more efficient if you have a better brand, right? But people are always confused. Should we do performance first? Should we do performance and brand together? Is there a hard metric or any heuristic to know when we should invest in brand?
Again, very, very interesting question and something that I would have personally asked my mentors, my investors 100 times, right? That how do I choose what is the optimum mix between brand marketing versus performance marketing? And honestly, I'm still figuring out. But what I've learned over the period is that you probably start with performance marketing because it immediately starts to get in certain revenue. And then once you scale, you will have all the signals and signs to understand when the performance is saturating, the CACs start to go up, the ROAS starts to decline, and that is probably a good time to start top of funnel brand marketing so that eventually you have enough warm audience in the funnel and the mix will continue to evolve with the stage of the brand. So it's not a 0 or 1 that I will switch from here to there, but probably with brand evolving, you need to start putting more and more into brand marketing and make that shift happen very consciously so that your CAC continues to improve with time.
Got it. Got it. I think that's a smart approach, because at the end of the day, you need cash flow, and you also need signals more than cash flow. As a company, you need signals. Ki, yaar, is your product wanted or not? And sometimes the brand marketing loop is very large. By the time you realize what happened, you may have a wrong product with the right brand, and that's not also useful. So I think lovely, very pointed answers, Piyush. Thank you so much for that. Before I wrap up the conversation, I had a parting thought which I would like from you. And that is about the most important thing, I guess, is getting through the first 1,000 days. It's so hard, right? Like there are unlimited days of just feeling this is not working out. How did you get through those first 1,000 days, and what's your advice to fellow founders to kind of, show resilience and crack the first 1,000 days?
I think first of all, it's the passion in the category. You really need to understand that you will only be able to build a good business if you are really passionate about the consumer, understand the category well. So that itself becomes a driving force to make the difference. What is your mission statement, so as to say? But I think also there are signs. Like for me personally, I would read a lot of consumer reviews and ratings, and I would open up my WhatsApp and realize that, one of the friends or one of earlier colleagues has written a message to me, hey, I tried your serum and I really loved it. And this is the reason why I think it's so good for my skin. And I think those small testimonials to everything you hear back from community, from your consumers, fuels the purpose that you are working on. It really helps you get through.
Lovely, lovely. I think that's a fantastic note to end the podcast. And I hope you had a good time, Piyush.
Lovely chatting with you, Kavan, and thank you so much once again for having me.
Absolutely. For everybody who's, tuned along, thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like another fantastic founder like Piyush, please subscribe to our channels. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.